Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plunging into, well, a really fascinating stack of source material. It's all built around this kind of radical idea, human irrationality. It's not chaos. It's systematic, it's predictable. And maybe most importantly, if we understand the rules, we can actually use them, exploit them to design smarter choices for ourselves.
That's absolutely right. And for this deep dive, we're drawing really heavily on the revolutionary work in behavioral economics, particularly the insights from researchers like Dan O'Reilly.
Right.
They basically showed that our predictable mistakes, they aren't just frustrating little quirks. They're actually these hidden forces driving our decisions in ways we rarely even recognize.
So our mission today, it's focused pretty explicitly on behavior change and recovery specifically.
Yeah.
We want to explore how these hidden forces can, trip you up when you're trying to build sustained healthy habits, and maybe how you can preemptively adjust your environment to succeed. We're going to unpack, I think, 3 major psychological tripwires. The subtle manipulation of context, that's the decoy effect.
Yep.
Then there's the irresistible lure of zero cost, the power of free.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, that constant conflict, right, between immediate pleasure and long-term goals that fuels procrastination. Let's just jump right into the first one, the systematic manipulation of choice.
Okay, so we start with context and relativity. Standard economic models, they kind of rest on this assumption that you, the consumer, you calculate the absolute utility or, the merit of an option.
Like you just decide rationally, is this coffee worth $4? Yes or no?
Exactly. But decades of behavioral research prove this is, fundamentally flawed. We're just not designed to judge things in a vacuum.
Instead, we're wired to judge something not on its own value, but strictly on how it compares to whatever else is immediately available.
Right. It's a mechanism that's actually pretty easily hijacked. And the most famous example of this hijacking is the decoy effect.
The decoy effect. Okay.
Yeah. It's a form of contextual manipulation. Basically, it's where an option that is functionally irrelevant or maybe obviously inferior, that's the decoy.
Yeah.
It's introduced purely to steer your final choice toward a third preferred option. It just makes the desired choice look radically superior by comparison.
Okay, let's use the classic example from the source material, the Economist subscription study. Right. So imagine you're presented with 3 options for subscribing.
Yeah.
Option A, internet-only subscription for $59.
Got it.
Option B, print-only subscription for $125.
Okay.
And option C, print and internet subscription bundled for $125.
Right. Now look closely at those prices. Option B, the print only for $125. It makes absolutely no rational sense.
None at all.
Why would anyone choose to pay $125 for only the print copy when option C gives you the print copy plus the internet access for the exact same price?
It's clearly worse.
It's patently inferior. It's like an economic non-starter.
And that, listeners, is its entire purpose. That's the decoy.
Exactly. So when the researchers presented participants with all 3 choices, the results were kind of astounding. Almost nobody, 0 people in some early tests chose option B.
Right, because why would they?
But here's the crucial finding. 84% of participants chose option C, the bundled deal. They looked at the 3 options, saw that option B was print only for $125, and instantly compared it to option C, the print and internet, for $125.
And C suddenly looks like a bargain.
An incredible value, precisely because the print-only option is so clearly overpriced next to it. The rational deduction you make, subconsciously maybe, is that the internet part of the bundle must be free.
Yeah, it feels like a bloody steal, as one source put it. But wait, here's where the mind-bending irrationality really kicks in. If the decoy, option B, is functionally irrelevant because nobody chooses it,
right,
then removing it shouldn't change the outcome, should it? Rationality would say the choice between A and C should stay the same.
That's the logical assumption, yeah. But when the researchers removed the decoy option, B, and only offered option A, $59 internet, and option C, $125 print and internet,
What happened?
The behavior flipped dramatically. Without that easily inferior anchor, the decoy, the large majority of people, suddenly chose the cheapest option A.
Wow.
So the decoy, which was never chosen, dramatically changed the percentage of people who chose C over A. It just proved that external context, even if it's a useless, ignored option, dictates our perceived value and then our choice.
What really stands out to me here is that this tendency, it doesn't just apply to magazine subscriptions, right? It applies to, like, life satisfaction.
Oh, absolutely.
We're constantly trapped in this endless cycle of comparison, measuring our success, our worth, our happiness, not against some absolute standard, but against the people immediately around us.
That is the profound psychological consequence of relativity. We are reference point dependent. It's why things like social media can be such a powerful engine of dissatisfaction, you
Yeah.
know? If you define your success based on a relative comparison, say keeping up with a peer or a neighbor, you essentially guarantee this perpetual nagging dissatisfaction.
I remember the quote from the source material illustrating this constant escalation.
Hmm,
The person who buys a Porsche Boxster immediately starts wishing for a 911,
right.
and the 911 owner wishes for a Ferrari. The goalposts just keep moving up based on the comparison set we choose.
And if we expand the comparison, it gets even worse. If you're comparing your starting salary as like a junior manager to the CEO's bonus.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up for misery.
Exactly. The solution, which sounds simple but is incredibly hard to do, is recognizing the need to break the cycle of relativity itself. Focusing on absolute satisfaction, what you need, what makes you happy, rather than your relative standing among your peers.
This whole issue of comparing options, it leads directly into the different ways we actually make choices. Specifically, the two types of decision makers the sources talk about, the maximizers and the satisficers.
Right. Maximizers are those people who feel this internal compulsion to evaluate every single available option, every review, every data point, every tiny variation to make sure they make the best possible choice.
They want objective perfection.
Yeah, maximizing their potential utility. The satisficer, though, is different. They set a standard, find an option that's good enough or meets that standard, and crucially, then they stop looking.
Okay, as someone who compulsively reads Amazon reviews until my eyes cross, I definitely identify with the maximizer.
Hmm.
But logically, shouldn't the maximizer be happier? They did their homework. They chose the objectively superior thing.
You'd think so. And objectively, studies do show maximizers often make slightly better decisions overall. Maybe they get a slightly higher starting salary or find a slightly better product.
Wow.
But here's the profound paradox. They are generally and demonstrably less happy with their choices.
Really?
Well, the massive cognitive burden, the time investment, and that constant fear of missing out on the one perfect choice, what economists call opportunity cost, it makes them significantly more prone to regret, depression, and anxiety.
So the psychological cost of maximizing actually outweighs the minor objective benefit of the slightly better outcome. That's a critical insight for anyone in recovery, isn't it?
It really is. If you approach recovery as a maximizer, you might spend like 3 years deciding which self-help book is the absolute best or which program is the perfect fit.
Instead of just starting.
Exactly, instead of simply starting on a good enough path. The satisficer defines a path, commits, and moves forward, conserving their mental energy. A surplus of options. It only really hurts the maximizer. The satisficer is kind of immune because they already decided what good enough looks like, and they trust that initial decision.
Okay, let's pivot now. From relativity to another major driver of irrational behavior, the pull of the immediate reward. And as you noted, nothing is more immediately and psychologically rewarding than something that costs absolutely nothing. This is the pervasive power of free.
Yeah, the power of free is incredibly potent because it seems to just eliminate risk entirely. When we look at two products, one priced a bit lower than the other, we're often calculating this complex trade-off, right? Quality versus price.
Sure.
But when the price hits zero, that whole trade-off calculation just disappears. Zero cost doesn't just represent a good deal, it represents a psychological safety zone almost.
Let's illustrate this. The famous chocolate experiment is perfect here. It involves two very distinct products.
Yeah.
A cheap, common Hershey Kiss and a much more luxurious, superior tasting Lindt truffle.
Right. So in the initial setup, imagine the Lindt truffle costs 26 cents and the Hershey Kiss costs 1 cent.
Okay.
The overwhelming majority of participants chose the better tasting truffle despite the higher cost. The relative price difference is 25 cents.
Makes sense. Then the researchers discounted both chocolates by the exact same amount, just 1 cent.
So the Lindt truffle now costs 25 cents and the Hershey Kiss now costs 0 cents free E.
Uh-huh.
Logically, standard economic theory would say this 1 cent discount shouldn't fundamentally change the decision because the relative price difference between the two is still exactly 25 cents.
Right, the gap is the same.
But the behavior changed dramatically.
The Kiss, just because its price hit zero, gained this massive disproportionate appeal. It became the overwhelming favorite, even for people who knew the truffle tasted better.
Yeah. That zero cost activated some deep emotional, irrational trigger that completely overrode the logical cost-benefit analysis.
We see this failure of rational calculation even more clearly in purely financial examples, don't
Well,
we?
consider the scenario, often used in these experiments.
Yeah.
You're offered a $20 gift certificate for $7. Your rational profit is $13.
Okay, simple math.
Alternatively, you are offered a $10 gift certificate for free E. Your rational profit is $10.
So in a pure profit calculation, the $20 certificate for $7 is clearly the smarter choice. You walk away with $3 more profit.
Clearly. Yet most people irrationally jump for the free $10 certificate. The emotional weight of paying something $7 for the $20 certificate is psychologically more painful than the emotional pleasure you get from the slightly larger profit margin.
The elimination of the cost hitting zero is the overriding irrational factor.
Absolutely.
And this applies everywhere in modern commerce. I mean, think about Amazon. Before they formalized their current system, they introduced that crucial threshold, free shipping above a certain spend, like $31.90 or something.
I remember that.
That single concept changed consumer behavior overnight, not towards minimizing the total amount spent, but toward prioritizing the elimination of that shipping cost. People will often buy an unnecessary extra item, like a $4 battery they don't need, just to hit that $31.90 threshold and eliminate the $5 shipping fee, which makes no sense financially.
That behavior is the power of free inaction. The emotional discomfort of paying for shipping, which feels like this punitive extra cost, it's greater than the discomfort of spending $4 more than necessary on an actual item.
It really seems like all these predictable irrationalities, the decoy effect, the power of free, they're ultimately related to our biggest internal struggle, the ability to delay gratification.
I think so.
When we talk about recovery or sustained behavior change, the primary hurdle is that conflict between what we know we should do and what we feel like doing right now.
So that brings us right to the core mechanism of procrastination. We often define our long-term goals, saving for retirement, starting the diet, exercising 5 times a week, when we are in what the research calls a cool state.
Right, the rational forward-thinking state.
Exactly. This state is logical. It sets these lofty long-term plans. The plans are pristine, well thought out, logical.
Life happens.
But then life happens. As our sources put it so well, the lava flow of hot emotion comes rushing in. The hot state is short-sighted, it's impulsive, it seeks immediate gratification.
And in that hot state,
Saving $500 for retirement seems utterly pointless compared to the immediate, tangible pleasure of spending that money on a spontaneous vacation. The promise of future health just pales in comparison to the immediate sensory pleasure of, say, a slice of cake.
So the systems that govern our immediate action are fundamentally misaligned with the cool state goals we set for ourselves. The goals just collapse in the moment of decision because the hot state sees the world through this radically different, short-sighted lens.
And this physiological reality gives rise to what's called the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
Simple but powerful.
Very. The human brain, having evolved to prioritize immediate survival and immediate rewards, is just not well equipped to manage delayed gratification without significant external or internal structuring.
And this reinforcement cycle, it's driven by neurochemistry, right? Specifically the dopamine spike. We often think of dopamine as the pleasure chemical, but that's kind of a simplification, isn't it? It misses its real function in habit formation.
Precisely. Dopamine isn't really the pleasure chemical. It's more the craving or desire chemical. It's what drives us to seek. And crucially, dopamine doesn't just spike when you get the reward, the cake, the cigarette, the social media notification.
When does it spike?
It rises before taking the action, immediately after the cue is recognized.
So if I see the wrapper on the cake, that's the cue. The dopamine spikes before I even eat it, generating that intense desire.
Exactly. That spike reinforces the immediate action, regardless of whether that action is good or bad for your long-term health. The brain just registers, hey, this action led to that great feeling of wanting and seeking, so we must repeat this exact sequence next time.
Wow. That's the core mechanism reinforcing bad habits like endless phone checking or reaching for an addictive substance. It's the seeking, the anticipation that locks the habit loop in place.
And this mechanism also explains why simply using external motivation like extrinsic rewards, money, prizes, can be a really dangerous trap when we're trying to build long-term sustained effort, especially in recovery.
Right. The hidden cost of extrinsic motivation. The motivation 2.0 bug.
Yeah, exactly. Research shows that paying people to exercise or offering cash to stop smoking or rewarding compliance for taking medicine, it produces strong, immediate results. If your goal is just short-term compliance, it works beautifully.
But the moment you pull the reward.
Poof, the motivation evaporates. Because the healthy behavior was never intrinsically valued, it became linked only to the cash incentive.
So the external reward actually dampens the internal drive.
It replaces it, yeah. Once the external incentive is removed, the brain sees no reason to continue, and the healthy behavior often disappears entirely. Sometimes leaving the individual even worse off because the behavior is now kind of tainted by that expectation of payment.
So how do we use rewards effectively then without sabotaging intrinsic motivation? Is there a way?
Well, the sources suggest a critical nuance. Rewards are far less damaging if they're perceived by the individual as enabling them to do something interesting, creative, or autonomy-affirming,
Oh, all right.
rather than constraining them to meet some prescribed goal that they didn't fundamentally endorse. If the incentive facilitates competence or greater freedom, like, say, funding a class related to their field, then the psychological cost is mitigated. The intrinsic motivation can remain intact or maybe even be amplified.
Okay, this is where we really shift our focus. If we know our minds are predictably irrational, easily hijacked by context, by immediate rewards,
Yeah.
we have to design internal systems that protect us. Let's start with how we deal with the inevitable mistakes we make along the way.
Right, and that requires understanding cognitive dissonance, that deeply uncomfortable conflict that arises when our beliefs clash with our actions.
Like if I believe I'm a fundamentally moral, healthy, organized person, but I just behaved immorally, or ate junk food, or failed spectacularly at my project, I feel that dissonance.
Exactly. And the magnitude of that discomfort, the sources tell us, it's determined by how important the decision was, like quitting a lifelong habit, and how attractive the unchosen alternatives were.
So how do we as humans instinctively try to reduce this psychological discomfort?
Well, we almost never change the past action, right? It's done. So we change our cognition about the alternatives. We engage in self-justification.
We rationalize.
We rationalize. We emphasize the positives of our chosen action. Oh, I only ate the entire cake because it was my cousin's birthday and it was a masterpiece. And we minimize the negatives of the rejected option. Dieting makes me miserable anyway, and my life is too stressful for that right now.
And this self-justifying behavior is the psychological mechanism that can really derail recovery. Instead of confronting that painful conflict between the goal and the failure, we just dismiss the goal itself.
Precisely. The classic cognitive dissonance example is the new car owner who suddenly starts reading advertisements only for the specific car they just bought, ignoring all others.
Right. They're not shopping anymore.
No, they're reducing dissonance by reinforcing the positives of the choice they already made. So in recovery, if someone struggles to stick to a plan, the tendency is to dismiss the plan. Oh, it was too strict. It was a silly idea, rather than confronting the painful reality of the inconsistency in their behavior. When individuals encounter dissonant information, like a smoker seeing graphic warnings, they're likely to just avoid or dismiss the information entirely to maintain comfort.
Okay, so to get around that self-justification trap, we have to shift the focus entirely away from external, measurable goals like losing 20 pounds or earning X amount of money to identity over outcomes.
Yes. Building better habits is fundamentally not about having something. It's about becoming someone. Outcomes are delayed. They're often outside our immediate control.
But identity is immediate. It's internal.
Right. You have the power to change your beliefs about yourself right now. Every small habit you choose today, even if it's imperfect, is like a vote for the identity you want to adopt.
So if I want to become a resilient, disciplined person, then my resilient and disciplined actions, no matter how tiny, they reaffirm that identity.
Yeah.
And that makes the next choice easier.
Exactly. But again, this identity shift is constantly under threat from that lava flow of hot emotion. When the stress hits, the logic disappears, the hot state takes over, and that's because of a critical cognitive truth that governs behavior. You rarely act on what you know is logically right. You act on what you feel is safest, fastest, or most relieving right now.
So the key is emotional regulation. When you regulate the emotion, logic becomes available again.
That's the core task.
So we need a practical, immediate tool, something to interrupt that cycle, like a field drill we can use the second the craving or frustration hits. We need the 90-second reset.
Yes, this is a really powerful short intervention. It's designed to actively regulate the nervous system and make logic accessible again when that threat response system is kicking in. It's rooted in bringing awareness back into the body and slowing down that physiological hijack. It involves 4 key steps.
Okay, step 1, name the feeling. Just acknowledge the emotion, anxiety, craving, self-pity, frustration. Don't judge it. Just label it.
Step 2. Locate it in your body. Where are you physically holding that tension? Is it a knot in your stomach? Tight shoulders? A constriction in your chest? This shifts your attention away from the frantic story in your head to the actual somatic experience.
Okay. Step 3. Breathe slowly into that area for maybe 6 to 10 slow, deep breaths. This is the mechanism that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. It actively calms the physiological state.
And finally, step 4. Take the smallest values-aligned action you can complete in under 2 minutes. This is the tiny action that reaffirms your desired identity, right? It's a conscious vote against the hot state.
It could be just drinking a glass of water, doing one push-up, sending one email.
Exactly. The goal is momentum, not perfection. Just a small win.
The need for that kind of physical intervention really highlights that our entire system, our irrationality, our difficulty with delayed gratification, it's fundamentally rooted in this physiological design flaw. We confuse psychological threats with physical dangers.
The research on stress and the brain absolutely confirms this. The moment we make a mistake or encounter hardship or even just hear a critical voice in our own head, we instinctively trigger the ancient threat defense response.
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in instantly. Cortisol and adrenaline flood the system. The amygdala, the brain's alarm center, springs into action.
And this ancient system doesn't differentiate, does it? It responds the exact same way to a physical threat, like a snarling dog, as it does to a cognitive threat, like thoughts such as I'm such a loser or my boss hates me.
The physiological response, the racing heart, the constricted thinking, it's identical.
And critically, that defensive state shuts down access to logic, vulnerability, growth.
Completely. When you're in fight or flight mode, you cannot access your prefrontal cortex for complex, long-term decision-making. That's why the essential countermeasure to this defensive reaction, the thing that mitigates it and allows for vulnerability, is self-compassion.
Self-compassion. The secret sauce.
It really is the secret sauce because it requires you to consciously soften that defensive response. It allows you to learn from mistakes without being crippled by shame or fear, which are just the psychological manifestations of the threat response.
This whole exploration of our psychological structure, especially the need to regulate that threat response, it suggests that individual freedom kind of has to operate within a larger framework of structure, doesn't it? It connects our personal struggle to broader societal requirements for meaning.
Indeed. Sociologists like Durkheim observed this over a century ago. People need obligations and constraints to provide structure and meaning to their lives. Unrestricted freedom, just doing only what you desire, can be profoundly destabilizing.
Right.
Historically, those who lacked sufficient social constraints and bonds, a state he called enemy, were statistically more likely to succumb to self-destructive behaviors.
So the challenge for us is kind of twofold. Finding internal freedom while also recognizing the external forces constantly shaping our choices.
And recognizing that the way control is exercised has changed. In modern society, controllers, governments, advertisers, companies, they often switch to non-aversive measures. They use positive reinforcers, subtle rewards, instead of traditional punishment to guide behavior.
Which makes the control much less obvious.
Far less conspicuous, yeah. The feeling of freedom, of just doing what you desire, becomes a really unreliable guide when your desires are constantly being manipulated by invisible incentives, whether it's a manipulated subscription menu or a dopamine spike linked to immediate ease.
So we have to be active, conscious choosers, constantly aware of the context rather than just passive pickers drifting along.
That's the goal. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really pulled back the curtain on our operating system. We learned our flaws aren't just random errors, but predictable system behaviors. Decisions are relative, easily manipulated by context. The appeal of free completely overrides rational choice and profit.
Yep.
And our long-term goals are constantly being sabotaged by that hot state mechanism prioritizing immediate dopamine rewards.
But the massive upside here is that these predictable mistakes actually provide the blueprint for massive improvement. If we know where the trapdoors are, we can build better safeguards.
Right, like consciously breaking the cycle of relativity by limiting comparison or using the 90-second reset to calm the physiological threat response.
Or choosing identity over those immediate outcomes.
So what does this all mean for us? You know, the constantly striving, predictably irrational humans seeking sustained effort and recovery. If we're fighting against these powerful internal forces, how do we keep going without just collapsing into resignation?
Well, I think the critical takeaway for sustained effort and mental health is the need to embrace necessary tension. Viktor Frankl, drawing from his, profound experience, described this indispensable tension. The gap between who a person is right now and the potential meaning or achievement they still need to fulfill.
It's not a comfortable state.
No, it's not comfortable at all. It's a demanding state of stretching and growth.
So we shouldn't hesitate to challenge ourselves, to find our hidden potential, even if it brings cognitive dissonance or psychological effort.
Precisely.
Mm.
Because the absence of this tension, that state where you feel entirely comfortable with who you are and have no further aims, Frankl called that the existential vacuum. And that state, that lack of forward-moving challenge, can lead to widespread neurotic symptoms like depression, aggression, addiction. We have to recognize that maintaining the tension between the actual and the potential is an indispensable part of being human. If you eliminate the tension, you eliminate the purpose.
So the provocative final thought we leave you with is this. What small, uncomfortable tension are you willing to maintain today
Just today.
to become the person you need to be tomorrow?